Before I draw anything, I want the variable panel to tell a clear story. I'm creating 3 collections: primitives, semantic tokens, and component tokens. Primitives are the raw ingredients. They are named for what they are, not what they do. So I'm adding neutral color steps, blue color steps, a type size, and a spacing step. Notice the lowercase names and the path structure. Color, neutral, 50. Color, blue, 900. Font, size, 200. Space, 200. Numeric steps age much better than names like medium. These primitive values carry no opinion. A pale neutral is not automatically a card background. A dark blue is not automatically a button. They are constants that other tokens can borrow later. Next, I'm creating the semantic collection. This is where decisions live: surface default, surface raised, text primary, and action primary. These names describe jobs in the interface. That matters because text primary can become pale in a dark theme without becoming a badly named token like text black. If a semantic token mentions a color, that is usually a naming bug. I'm also adding 2 ordinary variables here that are not colors. One controls the switch knob offset and one supplies the status label. That gives us a theme change you can see in movement and copy, not just paint. Finally, I'm creating the component tokens collection. This layer names the exact implementation points: card background, card text color, and button primary background. This is the tier teams often skip, but it is the layer that lets a card change its own background decision later without changing every other raised surface in the product. The raw scale is first, the role is second, the component decision is last. Now that the collections exist, let's put the theme choices in the right place. Now I'm adding a dark mode beside light in the semantic tokens collection. This is the only collection that needs theme columns. Primitives stay single mode because raw values are constants. Component tokens stay single mode because they only point at roles. They should not need to know whether the interface is light or dark. That middle layer is the translator. It decides which raw value a role means in each theme, while every layer on the canvas keeps the same token binding. Next, I'll fill in those decisions. I'm filling the light and dark cells in the semantic table now. Surface default uses the pale neutral in light and the dark neutral in dark. Surface raised takes a different borrowed primitive in each mode, so the card stays visibly separate from its surrounding preview. Text primary reverses from dark to pale. Action primary reverses the blue direction too. The component never sees these raw color values. It only receives a semantic role later. I'm also entering 4 for the knob offset in light and 24 in dark. That difference will push the knob across the switch. Then the status string becomes light mode active in one column and dark mode active in the other. We now have color, number, and text responding to one mode. Next, I'll connect the aliases. Here is the chain that makes this architecture useful. I'm opening surface default and choosing the neutral 50 primitive for light, then neutral 900 for dark. Surface raised points to the pale blue primitive in light and the dark blue primitive in dark. Those are intentionally different from the default surface in both modes, so the card has a real raised layer instead of disappearing into its background. Text primary aliases the dark neutral in light and the pale neutral in dark. Action primary aliases the dark blue in light and the pale blue in dark. Every raw color is now borrowed by a semantic role, and every semantic name tells us its purpose rather than its hue. Now I move to the component tokens collection. Card background aliases surface raised. Card text color aliases text primary. Button primary background aliases action primary. Notice what I am not doing. I'm not putting light and dark values in this collection. These tokens stay focused on the component decision. The semantic layer handles the theme decision beneath them. So when a button needs to diverge later, I can retune button primary background to a different semantic role in one place. I do not have to hunt through frames, instances, or unrelated controls. The chain is primitive: semantic role, component token, then component. Next, I'll make the picker show only the choices that make sense. I'm setting scopes now because a good token system is also a good picker experience. Every primitive gets no scope at all. That keeps raw colors, type sizes, and spacing values out of the ordinary pickers, so nobody reaches straight for a primitive by accident. Surface and component background tokens are available for frame and shape fills. Text primary and card text color are available only for text fill. Action primary and button primary background can appear where the switch frame needs a fill. The knob offset is limited to auto layout spacing, and the status string is available for text content. This does not change the token values. It changes the choices a designer is offered, which reduces guesswork. With the guardrails in place, I can finally draw the card. Time to build the interface with ordinary Figma tools. First, I press F for the frame tool and draw the outer preview frame. This is just the canvas around our example, not the thing we will reuse. I rename it Theme Preview with Ctrl R so the Layers panel stays readable. Inside it, I press F again and draw the Settings card. I rename that Appearance card with Ctrl R. I give it enough room for a heading, a status message, and a switch without cramming the content together. The card sits in the center of the preview, leaving a clear background edge around it. That separation is important because our two surface roles need to stay visually distinct. Now I press T for the text tool and click near the top of the card. I type Appearance, then set a comfortable heading size. I make the text box wide enough that the word has plenty of room and will not wrap into the status area below. I rename this layer Appearance Heading with Ctrl R. I press T again for the status line, place it lower down, and type Light Mode Active as the initial fallback copy. The text box is deliberately wider than the sentence because text variables can change words when the mode changes. I rename it Appearance Label with Ctrl R. The heading and label use separate vertical positions so they remain readable when the heading is auto height. Next, I press F for the switch track. I draw a compact horizontal frame below the label and round it into a pill. I rename it Theme Switch with Ctrl R. Then I turn on auto layout for this small frame. The frame is the moving mechanism. Padding on one side will place the knob near the left, and a larger value will place it near the right. For the knob, I press O for the ellipse tool and draw a small circle inside the switch. I rename it Switch Knob with Ctrl R. It is intentionally smaller than the track with enough inset to read as a proper control rather than a dot stuck on an edge. I'm keeping the hierarchy simple: preview outside, card inside, heading, status, and switch inside the card, then knob inside the switch. If I need to select the knob while the card is crowded, I use Control-click to reach the layer inside. That is much faster than constantly opening and closing groups in the Layers panel. Look at the canvas now. We have a real piece of interface, not a token diagram. It has a clear reading order, non-overlapping siblings, and roomy text bounds. The next move is where the component tier earns its place. I'll bind this card to component tokens, not directly to semantic roles. Now I'm binding fills in the right sidebar. The preview uses surface default, while the card uses card background. That component token resolves through surface raised, but the layer itself only knows the card decision. Both text layers get card text color, never the action token. The switch track gets button primary background. The knob gets surface default, so it stays clearly separate from the accent track. Then I bind the switch auto layout padding to switch knob offset, and I bind the appearance label content to the status label string. This extra hop is small, but it means a future card change is local. Next, I'll turn this frame into a reusable definition.
I'm selecting Appearance Card and pressing Ctrl-Alt-K to create a component. The frame is now the main component, one source of truth instead of one isolated drawing. When I duplicate it, those copies become instances. They inherit the component's layout and internal variable bindings, while still allowing the controlled overrides Figma supports. Because the bindings are inside the main component, instances resolve the theme of the frame around them automatically. This is also the reusable piece we could publish in a library. Variants and component properties are the third part of component architecture. They control structure and state. Variables control styling, values, and themes. Next, I'll wire the switch to change the mode. The component is ready, so now I'm wiring the interaction. I select the small theme switch layer, not the whole card. Making the outer frame clickable would teach the wrong behavior and make every tap on the card act like a theme control. I open the prototype panel and add an on-click interaction to this switch. The action changes the mode for the semantic tokens collection. I point the first interaction to dark mode. The target is the semantic collection because that is where the light and dark columns live. The primitive collection remains constant and the component collection remains an alias layer. Now I add the return interaction for the dark state, so the same familiar control can take us back to light. I check the trigger, destination, and animation in the panel before moving on. This is worth a deliberate pause. The interaction is not changing a frame fill directly. It is changing the context in which all of our semantic variables resolve. That is why the result will affect several properties at once. Surface default will change the preview. Surface raised will change the card. Text primary will travel through card text color. Action primary will travel through button primary background. The number variable will change the auto layout padding in the switch, and the string variable will replace the status copy. One click, 3 kinds of variable, and no manual recoloring of individual layers. I'm leaving the control name theme switch so a teammate can understand the prototype wiring at a glance. Now let's run it and watch the chain travel all the way to the screen. I'm running the prototype now. We start in light mode, pale preview, raised card, dark text, and the knob near the left. I press the switch once. Now watch what happens. The primitive values stay raw. The semantic roles resolve to their dark values. Card background and button primary background follow those roles through the component token layer. The component updates on screen without changing any binding on the card itself. The status label now says dark mode active, and the knob travels across because its padding value changed from 4 to 24. Pressing again returns everything to light. That is the full chain. Primitive, role, component token, component. It is a system you can retune without rebuilding the interface. Thanks so much for watching. You just built a 3-tier Figma variable system with raw primitives, semantic theme roles, and component tokens that keep a reusable settings card flexible. If this helped, please like the video, subscribe for more practical design system builds, and leave your questions in the comments. And if you want your Figma variables and your code to stay in step, my DS Sync plugin is linked in the description below. It's free with pro features. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.